Everyone wants to change their life, but most people try to do too much too fast. James Clear breaks it down in a way that it actually works. Small changes, repeated daily, driven by identity, not by willpower. For today's episode of Beyond the Gear, I am reviewing the book Atomic Habits. So, starting off, one of the things he talks about is the 1% rule. Habits are the compound of interests of self improvement. Getting just 1% better each day leads to compounded growth over time. Because progress often feels pointless because at first you can't actually see the changes. But they are taking place. Changes just really they build up over time. Most of the time you're not going to notice. If you look in the mirror one day after a workout, you can't see any difference. You do that the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. If you consistently, repeatedly look for changes, you will not notice. But you may have somebody walk up to you and say, "Hey, I've noticed you lost a lot of weight. Congrats." What feels to you like still stale, unmoving progress to other people is progress. They do build up. James Clear talks about it in this way. He says that 1% better daily equals out to about 37 times better over the course of 1 year. So small victories, they stack up just like interest. You will build victories as you build interest. One of the key factors of that, though, is consistency. I will preach this till the day I die. Consistency is king. You can't sprint full force right away. That'll just lead to quick burnout and mass disappointment. I've been there. I've done that. I still live there to this day. I've understood the concept that when you give it everything you've got right at the beginning, usually it leads to a quick burnout. And you beat yourself up because you feel like that you're not capable or you're not getting anywhere or you've just stopped making progress. But the truth of the matter is you just wore yourself out. You have to take baby steps daily that lead towards your goal. That is the real true method of consistency. Small incremental changes. So consistency actually builds constant momentum, which actually will often beat out motivation on the days when you just don't feel like doing anything. If you have established the habit, your habit will outweigh your motivation to do things. That's when you say, "I don't feel like it, but I do it anyway." That is because you are consistent. That is because in your mind you're thinking, "I don't feel like it," but your body has built the muscle memory to the point where your body is used to the routine of going or doing the thing that you're doing. Even if you don't feel like doing something, that muscle memory, that routine establishment, that habit will outweigh, and it will push you and it will be the motivation that you need to pursue the goal that you're trying to pursue. But all of that is established through baby steps, through small changes. You have to work your way towards that every day, little by little by little. If I go to the gym to do a run, normally what's going to happen is I'm going to start out slow. Most people don't. I'm going to start out slow and build my way up to the level that I want to build up to. Never forget about rest either. Rest is a very important thing. But you have to make those small changes. Focus your effort on getting the most out of each rep rather than just obsessing over the end result. Comparison is the thief of joy. If you compare yourself to other people, and you look at other people and say, oh, I want to be like that guy. I want to be like this guy. I see these guys on social media that have a 12-pack and, they're just absolutely shredded. I promise you that is all smoke and mirrors. Even if it's not smoke and mirrors, they haven't shown the reps that they took to get to that point. Everything builds up over time. You never start out where you want to be. You grow and you build towards that. Running this 5K race that I'm running currently, I want to reach a pace of about 5:30 to about 6:30, so in that range. Right now, there is no way on God's green earth that I'm ever going to be able to do that unless I consistently work out, I consistently train for that. I can get there, yes, but I have to work for it. Even building this podcast, every small step matters. Small beginnings matter. I'm growing this from ground zero. When I started this podcast, I was at 0 episodes, 0 followers, 0 subscribers, 0 everything. Every step that I have gotten to thus far has been because of consistent growth. If I quit today, it may build based on the backing of the foundation that I've set currently, but I'm not going to get better. I'm not going to learn from each episode. I'm not going to learn from everything I put out. I'm not going to be able to see the metrics and understand the metrics and say, hey, this is where I need to make some shifts and changes. This is where the audience is slacking. This is where I am slacking. Focus your effort on each rep. The journey is always going to be better than the end result because you're learning from your mistakes. Thomas Edison himself once said that when he failed 100 times at making the light bulb, he didn't say that I'm a failure. He said, I found 100 ways how not to make a light bulb. You just have to keep going, keep trying, focus on the growth more than the end result. Growth over finish line. And the best way to do this is systems. Systems make your success sustainable. That was a rough one. Let me repeat that because I don't know if I got that out right. Systems make your success sustainable. You want to set goals to have a target that you're aiming for. Think about it like this. When you go to a shooting range, you're not shooting at the wall at the back. You're shooting at a target. You have a target. Think about the goals being the target, the end result being the X in the middle that you're aiming for, and then think about the methods, the systems, the steps as the bullets that you're firing. You want your goals to be something that you can actually do. Don't shoot for the stars if you can barely walk 3 feet. So you want to build a system to help you achieve those goals. You want to create systematic steps that will propel you. Like I said, the system is the bullets. Your bullets are going to fire you towards that goal, and your systems have to be solid. They have to be sound. You don't have to obsess over them, because if you start obsessing over the system, then you lose track of the goals. There's a balance point. You have to keep the vision in mind, but you also have to understand that the systems that you're creating are to help you get to that vision. As I said earlier, oftentimes the journey towards growth is always going to be more beneficial than the end result itself. For example, once again, repeating back the 5K race situation, I am more interested in the journey and the training to achieve that race than I am actually winning that race. Winning would be nice, but it's the progress. It's the mistakes I'm going to make along the way that I'm going to learn from that I'm more excited about, I guess I would say. You have to set a clear vision to know where you're headed. because that's what's going to guide you towards, guide you on the path towards your goals. But keep in mind, I mean, you're going to have to work for it every single day if you want to see real progress. Faith without works is dead. You can have your vision in mind, even if it's not a tangible thing that you can hold and feel and smell and taste. You know it's there, though. You know where you want to go. You know what you want to achieve. But you're going to have to put in the reps. That's the number one thing I learned. Probably the hardest lesson I've learned is that you have to put in the reps. I would love for this podcast to be, at a level where, I have just an excess amount of followers or subscribers and I get consistent feedback and things like that. But as it stands right now, I don't have enough training. I don't have enough experience doing this stuff to reach that goal, nor have I built the depth of content. I haven't put in enough reps, so to speak, to get to that level versus these other guys that are already there. You go back and you look and they're 3, 4, 5 years in deep now. They've been at it for a really long time. You go back to their first episodes, they look just like mine. They have trained themselves. They have consistently kept posting and kept putting stuff out there to the point where now they're at a level where they are succeeding and they are achieving the goals that they are achieving. And you got to think about it like this too. What are you going to do when you get there? Are you just done now? Are you done learning? Are you done growing because you have reached your vision? No. Your vision is going to be the pillar, the foundational pillar that you build everything else off of. I am never going to want to stop teaching people about what I'm teaching, about the apex mindset, about, mental, physical, and spiritual peak performance. I'm never going to want to stop doing that. How I do that may change though, and the methods that I use to propel that forward are always gonna morph and grow and get better over time. And my following will grow only as I stay consistent and continue to put stuff out there and continue to present my information better and continue to grow better. So you're going to have to work for it. There is no way around that. There is no easy route. The easiest route to take is always going to be the path of least resistance, which is the one that we default back to all the time. But it just doesn't exist for success. It doesn't. You're going to have to work for it. So moving forward, James Clear also mentions something called the habit feedback loop. Every habit follows a pattern. If you understand the pattern, you can change it. The habit feedback loop has about 4 steps that it follows. So step 1 is going to be the cue. This is the trigger. Usually it starts in the subconscious. Whatever is causing the trigger, it could be, a smell, a familiar smell. It could be a location. It could be a sound. Somebody says something, wording, phrasing, et cetera, et cetera. What happens is it will cause the amygdala, part of your brain, and called the amygdala, to scan your prior memories in your subconscious to events in your past that are similar to the trigger that you're experiencing now. You smell something, say you smell a scent and you're like, hey, that smells like my grandma's house. Or you eat a piece of food and you say, man, this tastes like my mom's recipe, or things like that. There are familiarities in the 5 senses, sight, smell, sound, taste, and touch. There are always going to be triggers that trigger, certain memories, certain feelings, certain events. This is the cue. This is what happens. This is always going to be the start of your habit feedback loop. And this can be a good or a bad thing, because there are negative triggers too. If you were abused in the past, or if you have suffered a lot of trauma in your past, that trauma sticks around. It's hard to reverse that. And so when something similar comes up that reminds you of that trauma, your brain will automatically kick into a fight or flight mode, and you're going to think, I either need to get out of here or let's get ready to fight. A lot of times this happens with highly anxious people, because they just cannot handle, or they are just too, they are highly responsive to an increase in the pressure, I would say. They feel like people are judging them. They feel like, their whole world is crashing down. They start sweating. They start, their heart starts racing, things like that. That is usually your adrenaline kicking in and saying, hey, we got to go. We got to do something here. Not always a positive thing, but not always a bad thing either. The cue or the trigger can be positive as well. Like I said, this reminds me of my grandma's house. That may bring back good memories that make you feel good, things like that. So after the cue, after the trigger, comes the second part, which is the craving. So this is the desire. So you don't actually crave the action itself. You don't crave eating the donut. You don't crave, doing the thing. You actually crave the dopamine hit that you get when you perform the action. When you do something that is highly addictive or enjoyable, you get a dopamine rush. Your brain will release dopamine, which is the feel-good drug, so to speak. So what happens is your brain actually starts to anticipate the reward. It's saying, hey, we're going to get a dopamine rush from this. Let's make steps towards doing this thing. If you eat a donut and it's pleasurable, you're going to get a dopamine hit from that eating that donut, and then your subconscious is going to associate eating a donut with dopamine rush, which associates with let's do this often. It feels good. Let's keep it up. So your brain is like, hey, you're eating this donut, or there's a donut sitting there, it's starting to fire off some synapses saying, hey, this felt good last time. Let's go grab that donut. Let's get that hit again. Let's get that high again. It's an addiction. So what happens is the craving will actually make steps to move you towards the reaction, which leads into phase 3, or part 3 rather, which will be the response. So this is the actual action you take in response to the craving. This is how you're responding to the craving. Normally it's driven by ability or motivation, and also by friction, meaning how easy or how difficult it is to perform that action. By default, as I mentioned earlier, we tend to take the path of least resistance. Our minds are defaulted to the easiest method of success. So the harder it is to do, the less likely you are to do it. And also, the more steps that are involved, the more difficult it becomes. This can be converted into a very positive thing if you start reducing the friction. Make it easier to do, take some steps out of it, prepare yourself or prepare ahead of time to achieve that thing, that habit, so that it's easier. The easier and easier you make it, the more and more likely you are to actually succeed at it or do it. So to recap, it starts with the trigger, it moves on to a craving, and then you respond, either positively or negatively towards that craving. Again, this can go negative too. Say you're fixing to go speak in front of 100 people, and your brain is saying this is dangerous, don't do this, this is, let's run, and say you do, and you miss out on an opportunity because of your anxiety. That is missing out. So phase 3, or part 3, response, will then move into part 4, which is the final part of the feedback loop, called the reward. So this is the outcome that satisfies the craving and will close the loop. Completing the loop will store it away in your brain to reference back to later. Remember how earlier I mentioned that when the amygdala is activated, it will scan your subconscious and look for things in the past that has happened similar to this. So closing that loop is storing it away for future reference. This is so that it knows how to respond in the future, which is what creates the habit. Completing all 4 of these steps creates a habit. What I have not mentioned yet is that it doesn't just happen with the first loop. You do this over and over and over again, and that habit becomes set in stone. It becomes an actual pathway in your brain. You know how your brain is lumpy and things like that? Those are actual pathways that your neurons create when you start doing things. This can be used. So this habit feedback loop can be used for both positive and negative situations. Good loops that promote healthy habits, such as going to the gym every day, or taking care of your body, or eating right, or being able to say no to things, or just overall mental health, good mental health, that's going to promote confidence, and it's going to help build consistency. You're going to be more likely to stay consistent when you have positive feedback, positive rewards, positive dopamine rushes from these habits. Negatively, though, unhealthy habit loops will actually create short term gratification and can end up sabotaging your progress. You can short circuit your progress simply by allowing yourself to interrupt your consistent feedback loop through negative dopamine rushes. This is how addictions to porn happen, things like that. It can negatively infect you and negatively impact you. And unfortunately, a lot of the negative dopamine short term, we always want we always want to feel good in the short term. Nobody pretty much ever wants to feel good in the long run. That is just a default system that our brains have developed. As human beings, that is how you naturally are. You can train yourself to wait for the long-term gratification, but more often than not, when we talk about temptations, we're usually talking about the short-term gratifications, the short-term dopamine boosts we get from doing short-term negative habit feedback loops. So you can take this habit feedback loop that James Clear has talked about, and you can use it to better help you create better habits in the future. So what are some things that we can do to actually help us change habits? I'm going to give you some practical tools for changing habits. Really, you don't need more willpower. You just need a better strategy. First thing you need to do is you really need to start by changing your identity. Who do you want to become? By tying habits to an identity, you increase the likelihood of actually achieving them. That's why I constantly say, I don't want to just run. I want to be a runner. When you put yourself in a position where that is now becoming who you are, you're changing the level of intensity, I would say, and also the level of impactfulness of that change. You need to learn to start changing your vocabulary. Instead of saying, I want to read a page, you need to say, I want to be somebody who reads. I want to be a reader. Identity change is always a much deeper and a much stronger motivator than just simple goals, because every action that you take after putting an identity to a goal is a vote for the type of person that you want to become or that you're trying to become, not just a new thing that you're trying to do, making it a lot more impactful, as I said earlier. So you need to allow yourself to, you need to visualize the person that you want to become. You need to say, like I did, I want to be a healthy individual. I want to run. I want to be a runner. I want to be somebody who runs. That's partially the driving force behind competing. Runners compete. That's what they do. A lot of them do. And it's something that I enjoy. And so, that's who I want to become. Starting this podcast, I didn't say I wanted to make an episode. I didn't say I want to make a podcast. I want to be a podcaster. I want to be someone who podcasts, because that is tying an identity to things. If you have a vision in mind of a business you want to start, don't say, I want to do this as a business. You need to say, I want to be a CEO. I want to be a business owner. I want to be an entrepreneur. And you'll notice that it doesn't even, when you do that, the one goal or the one step that you may have developed or thought about to get you to that point, you may end up getting other goals that pop up to help you become that person. There may be new pathways, new avenues of things that you want to change about yourself that you didn't even notice you wanted to change until you've tied your identity to it. For example, starting a business is very difficult. If you just go into it thinking, I'm going to sign a DBA and I'm going to start a business, you're not going to succeed. Instead, if you think, I want to be an entrepreneur, well, guess what? Starting a business isn't the only part of an entrepreneur. You're also then going to think, I need to develop myself better because I want to be a CEO. I want to read books now that help me be a better CEO. I want to learn more. I want to start taking online courses. There are going to be changes and shifts in your mindset that are going to help you develop into that person, because that person carries a lot more weight. So that's one good method, and that's probably, in my opinion, the strongest method to start changing your habits. Be your vision. Be your vision. Don't just achieve your vision. Another method is called habit stacking, which can help you build better routines. So what that basically means is you utilize what's already there, what's already working, to help you add on new habits. So for example, every single morning that I wake up, every day before I go to work, I drink a cup of coffee. It's just established. I've done it for years. It's part of my routine. I will always have at least 1 cup of coffee in the morning. If I am trying to develop a new habit, say for example, I want to start writing a book. What I can do is say, okay, since I drink 1 cup of coffee every single morning without fail, or habit stacking looks like this. Since I drink coffee every single morning, when I drink that coffee, I want to write 1 paragraph. Associate a new habit with a habit you've already had established. So now, instead of just drinking coffee, now I'm drinking coffee and writing a paragraph. You stack it on top of things that are already working for you. Or another example, after I drink my morning coffee, I will stretch for 2 minutes to help blood flow. You put things on top of things that you already have established, because you're already going to do those anyway. I'm already going to drink coffee anyway, so I might as well add on something to it. It also helps you remember to do it too, if it's involved with things that are already established. Another thing that you can do is you can design your environment to support your success. We are all influenced by the temptations around us, as I said earlier, that will trigger cravings. Going back to the habit feedback loop, there's always a cue that leads to a craving. There are everywhere. We are always influenced by our 5 senses. So why not start using that to your advantage? Remember the path of least resistance. If I'm going to study, I am going to listen to this playlist. Check this out. This is pretty interesting. So we can actually associate music with a specific action. And what will happen is your brain will, when it hears that specific type of music, it will actually tell itself, hey, it's now time to study, which is pretty crazy. If you do this consistently, you have to build that. So say, for example, like for me personally, I like to listen to a lot of jazz or lo-fi music, chilled out, chaotic, because since I am a musician, if it's not chaotic and hard for me to understand, then I'm going to try and analyze it, and then I'm going to focus more on the music than what I'm trying to do. But, if I'm trying to get some work done, really, really want to get some work done, I will time block, say maybe like 30 minutes. I want to, spend the next 30 minutes focusing specifically on this. What I will do is I will actually put in my ears a specific playlist, and what happens is my brain says it's study mode time, and I associate that cue, that music is the cue, auditory senses that tell me it's time to study. Same thing can apply for your rooms. There's a huge problem in the world right now with rooms serving multi purposes. Well, if you establish that that room has this purpose, then your brain will associate that room with that purpose. For example, in my bedroom, the only thing that I do in my bedroom is sleep, really. I do have a TV in there, and there are times that I use it, but 99.99% of the time, if I am in my bedroom, it is because I'm going to sleep. My brain is associated my room for sleeping. When I walk into that room, my brain starts to feel tired because it thinks we're going to go to sleep now. Same thing with the kitchen. The kitchen is for eating. What happens is the problem that comes about is if you go to your room and you study in your room. Now I know a lot of times you can't control this, but you can establish zones in that room. If you have a desk, this zone is specifically for study. If you have a bed, the bed is for sleeping only. You don't do anything else on that bed except sleep. Because what can happen is if you establish multiple things, multiple purposes for one thing. Say, for example, the bed. If you sit on your bed and you study, I know I'm rabbit trailing or kind of cutting off my last analogy, but if you lay on your bed and you study, when you lay on that bed to go to sleep, your mind is thinking we need to study. It's associating the bed with study instead of the bed with sleeping, and so it's harder for you to sleep at night. I can't dig into it too much today in this episode, but go and do the research and read this book. I'm telling you, it will change your mind and really shift the way you think about things. So that's why I said I established that my bed is for sleeping. When I go to that bed and I lay on that bed, I know I'm going to sleep. My biggest problem, and I'll be honest, is I play on my phone before I go to sleep. It's an addiction. This is counteracting the idea that if I go to bed, that bed is for sleep. If you sit there in your bed trying to go to sleep and you look at your phone and you play on your phone, your brain is still actively running. Your brain is still constantly receiving and processing information. And so when you lay down in that bed, guess what you automatically want to do? Pick up your phone, right? Because that's the habit that you've associated with that bed. So a good method to compete against that is to just put your phone in a different room and charge it in a different room, which I've thought about trying, and I will try probably here soon, and let you know how it goes. But build your environment, create an environment of success. Zone out, section out rooms and furniture for specific things that you do specifically. If you want to use your couch as a place of relaxation, then when you sit on that couch, your brain's going to want to relax. That's how it works. So build and create your environment to help you succeed, help you achieve those goals. Another thing that's interesting that you could do is if you want to go to the gym, pack your gym the night before. Pack your gym bag the night before, so that it's already there, it's ready to go. This goes back to the path of least resistance that I was referring to earlier. If it's already packed and ready to go, then you don't have to do that. You don't have to take that step. There's less steps now involved. And so now it's an easier thing to achieve. If it's already ready, then it's easier to achieve. All you have to do is establish the habit the night before of packing your bag. This is the method that I use constantly. I always pack my bag for the gym the day before. Always. This has never failed. That way in the morning, it's ready to go. Because I know that if I give myself a choice in the morning to pack it or don't pack it, I'm not going to pack it. Because I am a really speedy, rushy morning person. And so I don't give myself enough time to do a lot of things. And so that's another step in my morning routine that's already established that can interfere with other things. And I will probably forget about it, and I will probably, since it's not an established habit or trying to establish that habit, then it's not going to be as solid or sound. So packing it the night before, my new habit in the morning is now, I'm already going to grab my bag for work. Now I just grab my gym bag along with it. That's the new established habit that I've created. Or, get rid of the junk food in your pantry so that you don't have to fight that craving in the places that you're weakest. If you have a bad habit of eating junk food, if that junk food isn't there, you now have to go to the store or go to a restaurant or go to a fast food joint, or you have to actually go out and get that junk food in order to consume that junk food. It's no longer in your range of, ease, or you're in your area of access. It's no longer easy to get to. The harder you make something to get to, the less likely that you are to want it. Remove the temptations. You can't remove every temptation. There's always going to be those, but you can start making it harder to do bad habits. That will help you reduce the connotation, or that will help you that will help you do them less, reduce or increase the friction for negative habits. This also works opposite, decrease the friction for positive habits, as I was saying earlier. So there's a lot more insight into this book that I could dive into, but that's all I'm going to talk about today. Atomic Habits is it's all about not eating the whole elephant at once, but taking small, actionable, consistent changes that will build towards a better you. You need to make it fun. Growth should be fun anyway, This is all things that you're doing to be better. The only reason that you would even want to change is if you recognize that there is a problem and it's something that you want to be better at, so make it fun, make it enjoyable. Like I was talking about in John Kelso's episode, my stepdad, he talked about, there are different methods of working out. There are different things you can do to get the exercise in that you need. As long as you are moving your body and enjoying moving your body, you're going to be more consistent. If you don't enjoy it, you're less likely to do it. Use apps like Streak or Habitica to kind of make a game out of it. That's a good way to make it fun and enjoyable. If you, because you're associating an actual reward system with completing your tasks, completing your habits, and that makes it more that closes that feedback loop in a positive way. And so then, as that cue comes, the dopamine rush hits, and you say, oh, I can, progress. If I achieve this habit, then I get this. If I achieve this habit, then I get this. And you're just making a game out of it. And things like that. So I highly encourage that you read this book. Take it with as much, read it slow and really digest the information that it has in it. There's a lot of words and there's a lot of information to take in, but if you chew the meat and spit out the bones, then I promise you that it will start helping you in every area of life. And Atomic Habits, I've noticed, has been a book that a lot of people have referenced, even in different categories of videos. This is just a very foundational method of habits and habit formation and changing habits and motivation and things like that. I believe that America is in a motivation deficiency, and I think that the more and more that we can study and the more and more that we can understand how habits work and how they're built and how they can be changed, the more and more consistently we will start making better choices and build towards a better society as a whole. If you enjoyed this episode, I highly encourage that you check out the full series or have other reviews on other things, and we'll continue to have other reviews on other things as far as gear, physical, technical gear, books, software, you name it. The list is endless, and these are all things that I firmly believe in. None of it is ever sponsored, so it's all pure opinions. And if you like it, great. If you don't, it's all right. It's not everything is for everybody. These are just things that I've tried and tested and believe will help you achieve your mental, physical, and spiritual peak performance. So go check that out. See what you think. As always, stay motivated, stay encouraged, and chase every mile. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.